Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining this conversation with Dr. Stephen Cabral. We are going to discuss all things belly fat and hopefully provide you with some solutions. Stephen, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, I love to start with when and why you entered into the wellness industry because I know you have quite the story and it even
Mm.
mirrors a little bit of my journey, but share with our listeners.
Yeah, I think it's always fascinating how people get into either fitness or health, or what I do is as a doctor of naturopathy. For me, it was dealing with my own health issues. So I was always a sick kid, but I feel like growing up in the 80s, people didn't really know that they were sick. I had allergies, like low level asthma. I always had like skin rashes, like random things like that. And I would get colds like 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year. And our family doctor would just give us amoxicillin or azithromycin. We have Z-Paks all over the house. My mom had 5 kids, 4 kids under the age of 5. And so there was always, a lot going on in my house. We'll just put it that way. So it was just easier to just give us antibiotics whenever we got a cold rather than having to go and take 3 other kids to the pediatrician with the fourth. And so what happened was unknowingly, I was destroying my gut microbiome. So at 14 years old, I got brought to the dermatologist. What do? They put me on amoxicillin twice a day. So from all of my childhood, and then for 3+ years, I had taken over 3,000 capsules of amoxicillin. It seems crazy until you do the math, which is twice a day times 3.5 years plus childhood. And you're like, oh, wow. Yeah, that really does come out to about 3,000 capsules. And so when you swallow that much antibiotics, it causes leaky gut or intestinal permeability. Back in the 90s, they didn't even believe in that. Of course, now Harvard University has all these huge studies on it, but that also throws off your immune system. Lo and behold, at 17 years old, that is why my body crashed. My immune system started to shut down. I ended up with Addison's disease, rheumatoid arthritis. I ended up with type 2 diabetes, insomnia, acid reflux, and all sorts of other issues. So, went to all the best specialists in the world. They couldn't put me back together even after 2 years. And so I started to look towards natural health that I got introduced to. Fast forward to my mentor, Dr. Pete. She's the one who really put it all together 10 years later, which is crazy, and helped me to finally heal. When I met her, sick for 10 years, I got well in 6 months. So I always pay it forward, always give gratitude to my mentor. I learned from a lot of people, but she was the one to help me put it all together.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah, similar story to you. I was on blood pressure medication, also prescribed metformin as a 17-year-old, had all kinds of fun symptoms and issues. Mono, I had salmonella at one point. My immune system tanked, but similar, lots and lots of antibiotics growing up. I got strep 6 times a year.
Wow.
So, you and I can commiserate over so many of those different things, but I'm so glad that you had your mentor and that you were able to transform your own health. And now you're really paying it forward by impacting many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands all over the world. But I do want to dive into the topic of belly fat. And the reason that I want to dive into belly fat in particular is because so many times we're chasing weight loss, but we really don't realize that belly fat is the most dangerous type of fat for our long-term health and wellness. And I want to kind of discuss some low-hanging fruit when it comes to how to really burn this particular fat. And then some of the myths and misconceptions that many of our listeners have kind of fallen prey to. So, first and foremost, why is belly fat in particular so dangerous?
Well, one of the things that we like to do in our practice is we look at a continuum of weight loss and then wellness and then longevity. And the reason is that you want to live as long a healthy as life as possible. Like you want good quality years. Many people they've surveyed and they don't want to live to 100. And that's too bad. But the reason they don't want to is because they're in really poor health, both mentally and physically. And maybe socially, economically as well. And so that's understandable. However, if you have your health and you have your family, you have your loved ones, I've been to many, many very underdeveloped countries, and people still do want to live a long, healthy life. So I think people need to get back their health. But in order to live that long life, to even have that be a question mark, people are asking, should I use nicotinamide riboside or nicotinamide mononucleotide, try to do NAD precursors? Well, it's like so far down the line. If you're 30 plus pounds over your ideal weight, right? And your ideal, not, again, I say this all the time. I'm about 5'8". I had a client that was 5'8". He weighed 205. I weigh about 170. Okay. I actually eat more calories than he does, but as a human being, he is a much larger individual. Like his calves are the size of basketballs. Like that's all muscle. So people are built a little bit different. So when we look at BMI, although it's useful, we want to look at it as in context. It's like a 30 to 40 pound continuum, right? So, I like to always preface that. But going back to that is we don't work on longevity till we're well. And we don't really need to dive as deep on wellness, although it's important because it can help with the weight loss, is helping someone lose 30 pounds. 50 pounds, 100 pounds does so much for their health. And one of the reasons is, as you alluded to, it's that visceral body fat. So think about it. Visceral body fat is essentially hard fat. It's fat that is surrounding the organs. So you've got your subcutaneous fat, where if we lean forward, we get a little roll on the stomach. That's the softer fat that's subcutaneous. It kind of covers the muscles so we can't see the muscle definition as well. So you can train hard, but you don't necessarily ever see that muscle tone. It's there. You don't tone your muscles per se. You remove the body fat on top of those muscles after they've been trained. And then the visceral fat's actually below that around the organs. It's the most dangerous because it can lead to early mortality, mainly through cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes and its complications, and inflammation. And that inflammation could lead to stroke, heart attacks, Alzheimer's, dementia. So that's the biggest reason we want to focus on visceral body fat. It's not that subcutaneous body fat is good, it's just that it's less harmful than visceral.
Yes. Visceral fat can lead to early death.
Hmm.
That's it. When I used to train clients in the gym, gosh, 15, close to 20 years ago, one of the first things I would do is just pinch the fat around their stomach. And they're like,
Yeah.
why are you pinching me? Not, do I have permission to feel your fat? But I
Yeah.
wanted to see if it was hard or if it was soft. And if it was soft, I was jumping for joy because I knew within 6 to 8, maybe 12 weeks, we'd see a lot of progress. If it was hard, I knew it was going to take a little bit longer and there was going to be some fat loss resistance and there was kind of some deeper rooted issues that we needed to address. Faster Way is the only clinically proven fitness app to help you burn visceral fat, so specifically visceral fat, while increasing muscle, which is so profound and so exciting. But I love your perspective on, listen, there is weight loss, there is wellness, and then there's longevity. And you're right, we talk a lot on the podcast about saunas and NAD and the different, peptides that we're using and da-da-da. But that's just too far and too much.
That's the icing
Or
on the cake. Yeah,
it's the
exactly.
icing on the
Yeah.
cake. The very first thing that we need to address is the weight loss or the fat burn and really getting rid of this dangerous fat, because you could be doing NAD shots every single day and it's not going to help if you still have 30 pounds of fat that you need to burn off your
Mhm.
midsection. So I do want to, I don't want to go too deep, but I want to discuss some of the hormones that are involved in fat loss. And you and I both
Yeah.
know there's probably 17 hormones involved in fat loss, but let's dive a little bit into cortisol. And then we will address probably insulin, maybe estrogen as well. But, here's the deal. Cortisol is necessary for life. You could probably live without progesterone. You could probably get away without some other. You need cortisol. And you know this as someone who had Addison's disease. You need cortisol in order to live.
Yeah.
So define cortisol. Why is it so important? But then how is it related to fat loss and weight loss?
Yeah, so everybody blames cortisol as the bad guy, and I get that because having too much cortisol will burn out your body. The best way to think about it is you've got a candle and you add a little wind to that, it burns down that candle much, much faster, right? So it's like, okay, cortisol can burn real fast and burn you out real fast. We're burning the candle at both sides, right? At both ends. But cortisol, if you don't have it, well, it acts as an anti-inflammatory. So when you have Addison's disease, you walk around feeling like you have the flu. So all day, your legs are exhausted, they're heavy, they feel like lead weights. Your resting heart rate is higher because your body is in a great sense and state of stress and it's inflamed. You have joint pain basically all the time, brain fog, joint pain, all of those different things. It feels a lot like really low thyroid. Yeah, that's part of it as well. And so the flip side, of course, is when you produce too much cortisol. Well, what happens? Well, it imbalances specifically female hormones. So progesterone levels drop because Progesterone is a feeder for cortisol. So we teach this in depth inside of IHP. But essentially, you start with vitamin B5, and it moves to acetyl coenzyme A. It moves to cholesterol. It moves down to pregnenolone. And then it can kind of take one or two paths. It can go to cortisol, the stress hormone, or it can go to the sex hormones, DHEA, dihydroepiandrosterone, testosterone, and estrogen, and progesterone. And progesterone just so happens to then feed cortisol. So you kind of can't move any other way except through progesterone, 17-hydroxyprogesterone to cortisol. All right. So the reason why I wanted to state that is that when we are overly stressed, the stress could be work issues, right? Finances, relationships, lack of sleep. The sauna was too hot. The fast was too long. Running for an airplane, in the airport. Those are all examples of increasing sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. Now, all of those are honestly no big deal in the short term. It's when this happens after 3 to 6 weeks that we start to see it set in. And now all of a sudden, remember, cortisol gets preferential treatment because just like you said, it is life-saving and life-preserving in the body. So progesterone levels come down. Eventually, DHEA levels come down, which is needed for your immune system and anti-aging, and eventually will help to produce estrogen and estrogen and progesterone after menopause. And then you also, in men, we get a lowering of testosterone with chronically elevated of cortisol. It's one of the main reasons why ashwagandha, which has nothing to do with testosterone, raises testosterone levels. Why? Well, because it lowers cortisol. It lowers stress by about 33%. And so I'll stop there. We can kind of take it further if you want, but if you can't balance cortisol, one, you won't have energy in the morning, you won't be able to fall asleep at night. And two, it will prevent you from burning more body fat. And the reason is that it dysregulates your hormone, it dysregulates your blood sugar levels, and it tells your body you're in a state of stress, fight, or flight, and it does not want to then give up its reserves of body fat, which is fuel, for another day.
Okay. If you do not balance cortisol, you are going to have an uphill battle when it comes to burning belly fat. In fact, it will be impossible for you to burn belly fat if you don't manage or balance your cortisol levels. There is more cortisol receptors in the midsection in particular. I believe it's 4 times the amount. But I want to almost flip the script on this a little bit, Stephen, and look at it from a different perspective, because you mentioned work could be the stressor. You got kids. I got 5 kids. You got 2 kids could be the stressor. The fast was too long. You're in the airport and inevitably your flight's going to be delayed. But it's not the fact that we are experiencing these circumstances. It's actually the fact that we are not stress effective. Okay, so every single person listening to this podcast is going to have circumstances in their life in which they are frustrated or discouraged or da da da. But that is never going to end. Okay, we cannot sit on the beach in Costa Rica for the rest of our lives. I wish I could. You might wish you could, but that's just not the reality. It's not the fact that these things are happening to us. It's how we're responding to that. And it's the fact that we have been in the sympathetic nervous system, or we're kind of not tapping into that parasympathetic nervous system. So let's kind of flip the script on it a little bit and just understand life is stressful. Okay. Every single one of us can say that. All of us are going to have problems. We're going to have pain points, but we have to become stress effective if we want to be able to manage these cortisol levels. So what are some of your tips for becoming more stress effective so that we're not maintaining chronically elevated levels of cortisol and then just burning ourselves out?
Yeah, so, and we've chatted about this before, but I use this formula for all health-based wellness clients. And the reason is that the majority of dis-ease in the body comes from what's called the neuroendoimmune system dysfunction. So neuro means nervous system. That means there is an outside force or inside force causing a stress on the body. The nervous system is what innervates all of your muscles, organs, etc. It tells you if you should be in fight or flight or rest and relax. And so basically inside of the brain, it tells the hypothalamus to tell the pituitary gland to then tell the adrenals to produce norepinephrine, which is a big part of that. I mean, we talk about adrenaline in this country. It's basically the same thing. You've got norepinephrine and you've got dopamine. And then the adrenal cortex is producing glucocorticoids, which isn't the stressor for fight or flight. It's the fuel for fight or flight, right? So it's breaking down stored liver glycogen, or it's breaking down muscle tissue, which isn't good either. And that's why we have to be careful. When we're raising those levels too high, a lot of people are too stressed, and that's why they're elevating their blood sugar levels. It's one reason. But then also, the hypothalamus pituitary gland also signals to the thyroid to begin to slow under stress. Well, the thyroid is our main form of basically metabolic signal. Everything from cold hands and feet to hair growth on your scalp and eyebrows to dry skin. Like these are all signs of a slower thyroid. And the last part, and this is equally as important, is the HPG, which is the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. And that can cause infertility in women. It can cause menstrual cycle disruption and many other things. So it all comes back to nervous system stress. The middle endocrine system I just explained, which is the hormones, right? And the last part is the immune system. So we always want to understand is that this is how the body moves in this direction. So in order to be able to solve that, we want to solve it through the de-stress protocol. So diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, which is your sleep as well, and non-sleep deep rest, your emotional balance, doing work, like putting in the work for the mental health as well, scientifically backed supplements, because that'll help you the fastest, but foundational work. And then the success mindset, which is, yes, we're always going to be stressed. It's just going to be the next thing. And it's how we reframe this stress that ultimately allows us to handle those challenges in the future. One way I look at it is I always say, I'm still here. I'm still here. I've been through a lot in my life, mainly before the age of 30. And I've had to deal with these things. I'm like, okay, I've never dealt with this before, but I've dealt with something similar. And this is how I made it through. And so I try to teach that to clients as well as that. Who knows how, but you will find a way to make it through. You will. You'll be able to make that happen. So that's part of the reframing. That's very important. But Faster Way does a lot of these things already built in. So yours is not a no carb, low carb, forever plan.
Right.
Why? Because if you do that, you're going to drive your cortisol, you're going to skyrocket your cortisol levels and drive your progesterone and thyroid into the ground. Because we've run probably around 500,000 labs. We've run almost, more labs than any. We've got a huge amount of data. And so I share that because we know what happens. Like these things just happen. So you need to have some refeeding somewhere in there. And so how you do the cycling and you mimic certain high and low days, all of that works great. Another thing is exercise. You don't want to overdo exercise, especially when fasted, if you have elevated cortisol. However, that high intensity interval training that you're doing is one of the only ways to burn visceral body fat. So you do need to eventually get to high intensity interval training, right? That matters. But maybe it's strength training, like you talked about in the beginning. It's going for a walk instead of intense cardio days. I'm really happy to see that incline walking on a treadmill with a 10-pound weighted vest is becoming popular again because that's great zone 2 cardio. That's actually really effective, and that can be done fasted because you're not stimulating that central nervous system to the highest degree possible. And then there's so much like sleep. We never talk about sleep, but when you have 5 kids, you run a busy business, like all of these things, sleep just gets kind of pushed off. But it's one of the most important things to stabilize blood sugar levels, boost the sex hormones of the body, which is responsible for your ambition, your drive, your libido, endurance, like all of these things. And then, of course, we could go on and on with scientifically backed nutritional supplements. Like a product we use is Adrenal Soothe. It contains L-theanine, ashwagandha, phosphoserine. It shuts down cortisol at night. So it's like, and then magnesium, right? So most people are deficient in good quality magnesium. So not 500 or 1,000 milligrams a day, but a couple hundred milligrams is a nice place to start to turn off that central nervous system at night. So I'll pause there, take a deep breath. Let me know if there's any other follow-ups you'd like.
Okay, I love all of those nuggets, and you're absolutely right. So we're gonna dive into the nutrition paired with fitness for a second because my community is very familiar with the fact that at Faster Way, we pair our nutrition cycle with 30-minute effective workouts. We don't believe in doing more than 45 minutes per week total of high intensity interval training. However, I believe in the value of high intensity interval training. We anchor in protein. We focus on strength training. We do bar, we do yoga. We've just recently introduced Pilates, but there is value in HIIT. However, there's also a lot of confusion on the internet regarding high intensity interval training, all the way from you should do HIIT 7 days a week fasted to if you're in your 40s, you should never do HIIT. Okay, so we got like the two extremes where usually it's like it's their side his side, and then we're somewhere in the middle is the truth. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is, and
Well,
that's
each side is always wrong in 3 to 5 years. It just takes that long for finally the real science to be able to get out there. It's the extremes are never correct. We
right.
humans have been alive and doing this for thousands of years. We kind of we get it. It's just it's more. I mean, again, imagine if you said something outlandish as your platform, or I did. We would have millions of followers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we'd be both doing, I'm sure, business wise, even more. I know that's not my number one goal and it's not yours. My goal is
Right.
teaching the truth because I'm going to do this the next 35 years of my life or so. But that is how people become popular is a polarizing statement. And it's never correct. It's just never correct.
Oh my God. Okay. I cannot agree with you more. And literally this morning, I was listening to a podcast from a very well-known influencer in the wellness space, multi-million individual impact, a
Mhm.
huge platform, saying something that was so ridiculous and extreme. And I thought to myself, if I was willing to say these stupid, polarizing things on Instagram, yes, I would have a
Yeah.
bigger business. But I love your line that everyone who has an extreme standpoint is going to be wrong in 3 to 5 years because it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Listen, ladies and gents who are listening to this training, 7 days of HIIT, fasted every week, hour long, 7 days of HIIT. That is not the answer. Never doing HIIT because you heard some doctor on Instagram say if you're in your 40s, you should never ever do HIIT. That's not the answer either. The answer lies somewhere in the middle, but also you have to be willing to listen to your body. You
Mhm.
have to be willing to say, you know what, I am really wanting to burn this visceral fat because it is the dangerous fat. I do understand the science behind this. And so, yeah, I appreciate that perspective for sure, Stephen.
Well, when you look at it, they're most likely saying those things because they are built on that. They don't want to go back. Like, look at the dentist industry. Putting mercury into someone's mouth is insane.
Insane.
It's insane, right? But they can't go back on that. Why? I mean, imagine the lawsuit. So first they would have to get some type of reprieve so from going forward that there no one is able to sue them, right? It's the same thing. I mean, I've heard all there's no more keto anymore. Nobody does keto, right? Like that's gone now. Now it's carnivore. Okay. Well, it's basically high fat and high protein. Well, that's not going to be the best thing. People say, "Well, I get results on it." What works for you in the short term does not necessarily mean that it is a good long-term solution. If you have gut microbiome issues, if you've got candida overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth like I had back in the day, sure, you'll get fermentation when you eat carbohydrates. That just tells you that there's something wrong with your gut microbiome, right? Because when you look at true longevity-based studies, it doesn't say that you should eat 3 pounds of meat a day. Like there's no study showing that that's going to lead to a long, healthy life. And now when you look at the carnivore people of a couple of years ago, what are they eating? Fruit now, honey, raw milk. Oh, tell me the lion that eats a barrel of apples a day. Like this is so all of this is just wildness. Now, I will say that there are things that might seem polarizing, but they're not, right? So, like, that's the thing is like some people need certain things in the short term, but I want to say with Faster Way, you come into Faster Way, you might need the strength training not to failure, the yoga days, the bar for now. But
Mhm.
in 3 to 6 months, you can then, what we call a graduated exercise protocol, you then begin to move to one day of HIIT for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, whatever it might be. And I like that your workouts are 30 minutes for most of the time. And the reason is that cortisol really starts to rise at 40 minutes and then testosterone starts to
Mm.
plummet. So it's like, yeah, that's the right amount to use. And also, not doing high intensity interval training in your 40s is the worst thing to give for a recommendation for someone. And that is because if you, the best protocols have been shown, like the prescription for life, is that you're doing at least one day a week of high intensity interval training. Dr. Sears has proved it in his studies. I wish I could remember the other exercise physiologist right now, but it's called Prescription for Life. And they do a 4x4 and it raises your max VO2. And that's because your VO2 plummets as you start to get into your 40s and especially 50s. So when you look at your total program, the best science out there is about 20 to 30% of that is high intensity. The rest is on the lower end, which is your strength training and your walking and all of that. And so, yeah, and this is fairly recent that's been proven out. But most people, like yourself included, you know that because you've been working with clients for 20 years. And that's why,
Mhm.
for me, practitioners, they really typically know what they're doing, who actually have a practice, not people that are internet experts.
Celebrities.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So you might not even know this. We saw each other here recently, but I didn't tell you. We recently created what we call the foundations workouts for clients who are coming in with an underlying condition,
Mm,
perhaps a previous injury, or they're working out for the first time, or maybe they do have an additional level of stress in their life and they're not stress effective in this season. So we have foundations workouts, which are lower impact, quite a bit kind of easier to handle.
yeah.
And then we have our standard workouts, which is the 2 HIIT per week, 3 strength training, and 2 yoga bar or Pilates. And now we also have an advanced layer. So we have increased some of our workouts to 40 minutes, not the HIIT workouts, but some of the strength training workouts. We're doing currently supersets, really highly effective pod. And so I'm definitely excited to meet clients even more where they're at.
Yeah.
We also go through a quiz to recommend either a 12-12 intermittent fasting protocol or a 16-8. Some people start with a 12-12, kind of work up to a 14-10. Of
Yeah.
course, you have to look at your own life and, do you have kids who you want to have dinner with? Or maybe you're in a different season where you can, kind of skip dinner and start early with breakfast. So we're definitely becoming even more personalized, customized, and tailored to each individual throughout any season of life, which is really exciting. But it's interesting that you mentioned the keto. Like, yes, we're not hearing about keto anymore. Keto search on Google has absolutely tanked, but now carnivore is becoming more popular. And I heard another podcaster talking about carnivore, and he's like, yeah, it really negatively impacts my HRT score when I completely eliminate carbs. It's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
think? Like, you think? Um,
Exactly. I mean,
okay.
it's like carbs are the only thing that cut cortisol.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and also by eating a high level of protein, well, people are like, well, your protein can become carbs, so carbs aren't essential. Sure, through a fairly intense process of gluconeogenesis in your body. So if you need to break down protein or amino acids to create glucose in the first place, why not just have some carbs? Like it's the craziest thing. Like, so you're going to force your protein, your amino acids to digest those, break those down, and then go through another enzymatic process to create carbohydrates. Just have some carbs. Like
Yeah.
it's okay. Like your results will actually be better and you will age less. And that's the truth. And also all cause mortality, meaning that if any one of these diets was better than a essentially Mediterranean foundational type diet, take out a lot of the processed foods, of course, like the starches, things like that. If there was anything better, I would recommend that. Like I don't own stock in, the Mediterranean diet or, black beans or wild salmon. Like I don't, so I'm recommending these things because that's what the research shows, right? It's like omega 3s. Well, there's about 30,000 clinical studies on omega 3s. Taking 2 to 3 grams a day is about the right amount for most people. That's going to reduce all cause mortality and help with pretty much everything. And people are like, well, it's a polyunsaturated fat. I mean, yes, it is. And it also helps with this, this, and this. So it's just like the polarized views that you can never eat a polyunsaturated fat, or that all saturated fats are bad, or that it's like, it's just not true. We're like, there are different shades of gray that we need to look at. And usually when you overdo it, there are studies that show when you take 12 grams of omega 3s a day, it can have detrimental effects on cell membrane functioning, cardiovascular, et cetera. Yeah, I know, but that's 12 grams, right? That'd be like eating how many? 5 to 6 um, 6 to 8 ounce servings of salmon a day. That would obviously not be natural, right? To eat 6 salmon a day. So, like,
Yeah.
yes, we're trying to work with nature is like what we're ultimately trying to do. But then also, you want to work on longevity now. So you have to keep your muscle mass and your bone loss. That's
Mhm.
one of the biggest issues with GLPs, right? Is that 30% of the
Mm.
loss is from bone and muscle. And if you do that in your later 30s or 40s as a woman or beyond, almost unlikely that you are ever going to get that bone back.
Right.
It's you can, but you need to really be strength training to work to get that back. And so what happens? Well, most people don't use GLPs beyond 6 months to a year because of side effects or because of the cost. So when they come off of it, what happens? Well, they lose, or sorry, they do work. It's not that they don't. They lose about a pound or 1% per body weight, which, by the way, exercise and diet can mimic as well. But they gain all of the weight back. But that doesn't mean they gained all the weight back. That means they gained more fat back because they never gain back the muscle and the bone. That doesn't come back on its own. So these are things that the general public is not being taught, that we try to do our best, you and I, to educate them on that, meaning that there's a time and place for everything, but you want to exhaust all possibilities, or really, let's save these drugs for people that are 100, 200 plus pounds overweight that could really, use that to get back on track. And then a plan to be able to wean off as well. So that's kind of my stance on that, is that I'm not anti helping people get in shape. Of course I am. But don't think that this is, free of side effects. It can affect your long-term digestion because it basically shuts down digestion. It can affect your thyroid, potentially certain cancer-based issues. Now, there's a lot of upside for people that are far overweight, but a lot of people that are 20, 30 pounds are recreationally using that to lose that last couple of pounds. Those are the people I'm most worried about.
Right, right. Yeah. And as you said, the extremes are probably going to be proven wrong in 3 to 5 years. It is going to take a process and it's going to take some time, but we're going to start to see a lot of these negative outcomes. And for me, I'm always encouraging clients to chase muscle gains because muscle is directly correlated to longevity. Your lower body, your leg muscle, your upper body muscle is so important, which is why the faster way to fat loss is anchored in protein and strength training as well. We unfortunately are up on time, but I want to hear maybe.
I'm just getting started.
I
I
know. We
I'm
could
just
go
warming
for
up.
2 hours. And I love how I was like, let's just do like a very upper level, and we went straight for it. So maybe just one or two final tips for burning visceral fat and improving your wellness overall.
So visceral fat will respond best to low and slow, and so like lower zone two. For let's say someone that's 40 years old, 110 to 130 heart rate. That's about the right spot for your incline walking, or you're walking with again, don't put on a 40-pound weighted vest. It can throw off your posture. Like you gotta kind of work up to that. But most people do really well. They want just, adding a little bit weight. You don't have to, but if you can't get your heart rate up walking, then that might be something nice. You want to be careful doing too incline of an incline, because then it can end up with Achilles issues, tight anterior tibialis, the shins. But anyway, you can play with these things. It's kind of like you're coming out with an advanced workout. Well, you might say, well, that's too hard. It's not too hard for people that are ready for it, right? And so it's like, well, strength training is really hard if you've never been strength training. So it's kind of like you work your way up, and all of these things, matter. So you're either in essentially zone 2 or zone 5. The gray area is zone 3 and zone 4. You can dip into them, but the results aren't going to be as great as basically staying low or staying high. You're already doing it twice a week for your high intensity interval training. Again, you can work up to that, and then low and slow the other days. Your strength training, 3 days a week. How many times a week is faster way for strength training?
3 days.
Yeah, so 3 days is perfect. 2 days is fine. 3 days is optimal, not less than 2. And so then we want to look at, there will be periods of low carb and then refeeding, because you do need your body to tap into fat stores. Now, in order to do that, you need good sleep, balanced blood sugar, lower levels of cortisol. All of that is really important, because if you can't get there, if your body has sugar inside of the bloodstream, it's just far more challenging to really tap into fat stores.
Yeah.
So it is manipulating carbohydrates, not eliminating them, in order to then get those best results. So those are like the 3 easiest ones. Some next level would be, yes, cold plunges can work, but I want to mention, it doesn't have to be 37 degrees like your favorite Instagram influencer. All the studies on cold plunging is 50 to 60 degrees. Influencers do it at 37 degrees because that's the lowest it can go. And so they show how strong they are doing that. But by the way, that 37 degrees, well, you won't have that much bravado for long, because it's going to lower your testosterone levels with that type of shock of a norepinephrine, right? Because that's pretty shocking in the system. So set it at 52 degrees. You can get great results at 52 degrees. So that will help just convert different types of fat. We won't get too deep into white fat and brown fat today, because we could do another 15 minutes on that, but also sauna. So I don't have a lot of my clients do cold plunge, because neurologically they're already stressed, and adding a cold plunge is going to be more stressful. But a sauna can be really great for recovering from weight workouts. If you do it an hour and a half, 2 hours before bed, it can cool the body once you get out. It can help you get into deeper sleep, which is great. And also, you burn about 100 calories, 50 to 100 calories every 10 minutes in it. So it's really great as well. So I'm a big fan of those. So first three, and then I would add sauna after that, maybe cold plunge.
Yeah, yeah. In the faster way, we leverage carb depletion strategies with 2 low carb days per week paired with
Yes.
HIIT, but we don't overdo it. We believe in the value and the power of carbohydrates. Such good insight. I have a sauna. I've spoken with you about it before, but my body just doesn't respond well to the cold plunge.
Mhm.
Winter is a choice. Cold is a choice. I prefer the sauna. I do the sauna 2 hours before bed. Absolutely love that. And you don't have to, though, invest in a sauna or invest in a cold plunge or do these more expensive things. If you're listening and you have $100 per month, listen, intermittent fasting is free. Weight training is free. Pick up some heavy objects in your house. HIIT is for sure free. Eating healthy is not cheap, but at the end of the day, what do you want to invest in?
Mhm.
Healthcare, sick care, or preventative wellness. So,
Yeah.
really, really good tips, Stephen. Share with us where we can follow and find you online.
Yeah, so my main website is stephencabral.com. Stevens with the PH. My podcast is The Cabral Concept. It's a daily show. It's about 15 minutes long where I just try to teach one thing. So one problem a client has, why they have it, and then how you can solve it. So that's basically how the podcast works. And then I answer people's questions on the weekend. And then my book is The Rain Barrel Effect. So any one of those, they'll kind of be able to find that from stephencabral.com. But I appreciate always chatting with you and your audience, because one thing I will say is that all of those things are free, but there's huge value also to having an accountability community. And that's what you have a faster way,
Yeah.
because there's going to be a hard week. And then do you stop altogether? Well, if you're on your own, you very well may. But if you have an accountability coach, that can be one of the best things that you can do in order to improve your results for the long term. Remember, there's a lot of things you can do in the short term. Nobody's doing 5 to 7 days of HIIT for the long term. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, if that's your short term plan, you're getting results. How long is that going to last? Because studies show 12 to 16 weeks, that nervous system's going to burn out. So what's the plan to then taper off? And do you get as great a results because you're no longer doing 7 days of high intensity interval training? So what has to give? So anyway, I'm starting a whole nother podcast right now, but a program like the Faster Way just guides you through it. They already have the blueprint. You guys have been doing
Yep.
this a long time. So that is why it's one of our recommendations for people looking to lose weight and keep it off, right? Because that's important. Not just losing it, but keeping it
Mhm.
off as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Final comment. I'd much rather that you walk 7 days a week. In fact, I think you should. You need to walk
Mhm.
7 days a week, adding the weighted vest, great cherry on top, over 7 days a week of HIIT. Okay. And we
Agreed.
have a walking tracker in the app for that reason. It's not a HIIT tracker, it's a walking tracker. So, Stephen, you are the best. I truly appreciate your time. We are better off for it. And we hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Bye, everyone.